the presentation on sustainable development. He did it for me, touched all the points that I will elaborate on in the course of the next 30-40 minutes. But before that, I want to thank you all for being here with us tonight. Thank John and Rosemary, of course, and the staff of the Athens Centre. This is a place that I like very much, a very special place in Athens from the moment we arrived, Sarah Jane and I. And I'm here 2 nights every week, studying Greek. My professor is there. I have a classmate in the audience, so it's a big family for me, and I thank you all for being here tonight. The subject is United Nations Barcelona Convention for Sustainable Development of the Mediterranean region. It's not an easy subject in the sense that we all think we understand, we know what sustainable development is. Not many people know that the Barcelona Convention has been hosted by Greece in Athens for almost 4 decades. In fact, I had the honor of meeting the mayor of Athens last year. He didn't know. So that is probably our fault in the sense that we should do more here in the country that so generously hosts us. But as you will see during the presentation, our work is not really with Greece or for Greece, but it's for the entire Mediterranean region, with all the riparian country of the Mediterranean and the European Union. Let me, in the next 30 minutes, let me give you a quick outline of what I'm going to talk about. Just a few words about sustainable development and the vision that we at the Barcelona Convention of the United Nations have for the region, for the marine environment and the coastal region of the Mediterranean. A few words on the United Nations agenda for sustainable development that was signed off by all the heads of state at the end of 2015, and I will say a few words also about John's comment on the UN criticism that I think it's absolutely valid, but that needs some time to be rectified. There is a misunderstanding about what the UN is and what the role of the UN is, which is, okay, we will get more into this. I don't want to get already too passionate about it. We're going to look at how these global aspirations on sustainable development are going to come down and be translated through the regional dimension into national action and local action. And then I will introduce to you the Barcelona Convention, our work, our structures, what we do, how we support our work financially and otherwise. And finally, I'd like to focus on 2 specific aspects, one that John very rightly already referred to, because it is indeed a priority for the Mediterranean, but also at the global level, and that's the issue of marine litter, where the Mediterranean is one of the most affected regions, but also one where we are doing some progress, and I'd like to share that with you. The other issue is the marine protected areas, which is an important tool for the protection of the marine environment. And then we will have a chance to do some discussion, questions and answered. I'll try to be not too long, although I've been told, no, you need to speak for 45 minutes. But please, I will keep it short as much as I can. But there is a lot of issues that we want to discuss during and after the presentation, and there are also some short videos that I'd like to show you. So this is our vision, what you see on the screen. When I say our, this means the entire system of the United Nations Mediterranean Action Plan, so governments, the institutions, Secretariat and partners. This is something on which we have all agreed. This is where we want to go, a healthy Mediterranean with marine and coastal ecosystems that are productive, biologically diverse, for the benefit of present and future generation. And this idea of the benefit for present and future generation is in fact what defines the concept of sustainability. Because you know, apart, if we stop for a moment and think what it's been traditionally before the last 2 or 3 generations, there has always been a balance between the resources that we use and the way we have supported our lives and livelihoods. This balance seems to have broken, and I'm afraid that our generation, and I'm one of the older one in the room, but is going to be remembered as the ones who messed up. We need to be remembered also as the ones who found the solutions. And the idea of thinking of the future generations that will benefit from our action today is what is the defining element, as I said, of sustainable development. I just want to read you another definition, which is the United Nations definition of sustainable development at the global level, one that was developed in 1987 under the leadership of a famous woman, Gro Brundtland, and that is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So, as I said, this intergenerational equity is what we are after, and this is so beyond the protection of the environment, considered as a sector as it has been done so far. Really, we need to go back into sort of a spiritual, also a philosophical switch, in addition to its very urgent economical and societal switch that is needed. So, well, I think most of us here are from around the Mediterranean. I come from Naples, which is right there in the middle. It's almost a Greek city. Magna Graecia is where I come from, I like to say. And certainly the Mediterranean, apart from being, you know, a semi-enclosed pond, because it's a small sea really, it is also a defining element of our identity. We know it as the cradle of civilization. We know it for a history that makes us all very proud, that has shown the way for thousands of years, for cultural development, for extreme richness. I'd like though to give a few figures just to frame the discussion on sustainable development of this region. Well, the Mediterranean has 46,000 kilometers of coastline. Not many people stop and think that 1/3 are here in Greece, so about 14,000 of the entire coastline of the Mediterranean. 8,000 are Italians, and the rest shared among all the other beautiful countries. Population is expected to grow to 529 million by 2025, from 276 million in 1970. So this is almost a doubling of population in a little bit more than half a century. And the majority, of course, live on the coastal strip of the Mediterranean Sea, where traditionally the wealth has been. Tourism is a huge industry. More than half of those who live on coastal areas visit the Mediterranean coastal regions every year. So we are talking throughout a year more than 350 million tourists coming to this region. From the environmental, ecological point of view, the Mediterranean is one of the most important marine habitats at the global level. It is a biodiversity hotspot, meaning that the biodiversity that you find in the Mediterranean, which covers only 1%, and I will stop with figures, only 1% of the surface of the world's ocean. In this 1%, there is it is estimated that up to 18% of the world's known marine species reside. And this is an extraordinary wealth that it is our duty to protect and support. The Mediterranean is also a region where climate change is going to hit particularly harsh. In fact, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the group of scientists, independent scientists, who are the basis of the famous Paris Agreement on climate change that was reached at the UN a couple of years ago. This panel indicates very clearly that the region is highly vulnerable to climate change and that it will suffer multiple stresses and systemic failures due to climate change. So enough doom and gloom. These are facts, however, that we must all keep in mind, because as John said, there is an issue of individual responsibility also that we need to consider and to build on. Now, sorry, I went too fast. In addition to being a defining element of our identity, the Mediterranean has been traditionally also a very important source of growth and development for the populations residing along its coasts. And in fact, this is true all around the world, that the natural resource base props up much of the human existence, giving us land and fisheries, agricultural, supporting livelihoods and lives. And this is particularly true for the Mediterranean and for the marine environment of the Mediterranean. I mean, when you think of the Mediterranean, you think probably of fishermen, and even tourism now, which is a more modern industry, is one that is based and supported by the beautiful resources of our seas, and in turn supports millions of jobs, of families around the region. And so the way we manage and use these resources is absolutely fundamental, because it has an impact not only today, as I said before, but also for the generations that are coming after us. Just to talk about quickly other industries that are supported by the resources of the sea, offshore oil and gas exploration, huge pressure on the Mediterranean. It is calculated that in 2015, about half of the surface of the Mediterranean was already covered by concessions. So this is a trend, and we've heard about it recently. We read the big news often that new deposits of natural resources, oil, gas, are found constantly around the Mediterranean. Maritime traffic, around 30% of the entire world traffic by sea comes through the Mediterranean. Doesn't stop here, but crosses the Mediterranean, creating very important, again, wealth and supporting livelihoods and jobs, but also having critical impacts on the resources of the region. I mentioned very briefly fisheries. Fisheries provides 250,000 direct jobs. And this, when I say fisheries, it's not only jobs, it's also culture, it's also our famous diet, heritage, it's a way of life. So, just to complete the picture of this Mediterranean as a source of development, I want to also say that it is a region that has always been advanced in terms of capacity, in terms of, although with many inequalities, but in terms of high levels of education, economic growth, industrial development, a very vibrant civil society, leading research institutions, and great opportunity for partnerships. So while the pressure is huge, but I believe the basis for positive, meaningful responses, that basis is also equally strong, and is something on which we must collectively build in order to to answer. So, in conclusion, the Mediterranean is clearly under threat. I don't want to go more through this concept. The state of the Mediterranean coastal and marine environment varies from place to place, but all parts of the Mediterranean are subject to multiple pressures, and of course the cumulative impact of this pressure multiplies their effects. So now let me go take one step to the UN 2030 agenda for sustainable development. So in September 2015, the heads of state of the United Nations, and in fact was the largest number ever, more than 150 of them signed off this agenda that should define the way we live and we do things until 2030. And the agenda is built around 17 goals that you see illustrated on these slides. The agenda has a very powerful title, Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The fundamental point here is that the recognition that ending poverty must go hand in hand with a plan that builds economic growth and addresses a range of social needs. And when you look at the specificities of each individual goals, they all have, most of them have a clear reference to sustainability and to the environment. So the promise is that no one is left behind. As I said, this agenda is being now implemented. This is not a UN document, and here I want to say a couple of things. That we should not think of the United Nations as an institution separate from us. Maybe that's the Secretariat, but the United Nations is the nations of the world which have united around certain agenda and certain goals and objectives. And as such, the United Nations is us. So I am a United Nations officer because my job is with the Secretariat. But the work of the United Nations is not something that exists in another dimension, meant for solutions. Indeed, that facilitates, because obviously agreements by governments with their partners are things that support action and positive responses, but it comes down also to the individuals. Now, all this is happening, this agenda, and its implementation. I can assure you that there are very rigorous indicators that have been developed in order to monitor it in the course its implementation and its impact. All this is happening also in a landscape that is changing very rapidly, and this applies, well, as we know, to all our aspects of our society and culture these days. Stronger government, private sector and civil society capacities, a growing number of middle-income countries. This is a very big shift from the world as we saw it in the 70s, 80s and 90s. A decline of the importance of the development assistance by the rich countries, so-called. This is also something, a phenomenon that is new and it's changing very rapidly. New pressures, I said, climate change. There is a strong, we feel, erosion of human rights. There is an increasing inequality compared to the enthusiasm and crisis of the 70s and 80s, but now it's probably more subtle but more widely diffused. An array of new actors, the impact of social media, which is obviously we like to see in the most positive way, and a continuing need of the poorest countries and the poorest part of societies for support and for help. Let me show you a different way to look at the goals, and this is what we call the 5 Ps. Practically, those 17 goals, organization and environment and marine, etc., education, etc., can be really brought back around five words, and these are people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. And in fact, these are the pillars of the 2030 agenda and of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. These goals are not to be taken individually. They are one thing that we need to move away, we feel very strongly about this, is the fact that environment is a sector. It's considered as a sector. You have a ministry for environment, you have people studying environment. Environment is not a sector. Environment is our life, it's what we are doing, is a cross-cutting, even that is really inadequate as a concept, element throughout all that we do, and does require an integrated response from all sectors. And this is what we are trying to do with this agenda and with this concept, for instance, in this case of sustainable development through the five P's. Now, I will not spend much time on this, but because we spoke about the UN, there is the Secretary General is continuing very strong reform of the United Nations. What you see here is just a snapshot of what is happening. Started last year, a continuing plan in all these areas for the next. In fact, some of the objectives are 10 years down the road in terms of, as you see there, management, development systems, peace and security, gender parity, counterterrorism, human rights, upfront, and other sectors. And I can tell you that this Secretary General is very serious. He used to be the head of the UN refugee agency. He spent a lot of his time in the field. He knows the reality of poverty, and is one who really wants to make a change. And I believe that we are on a good path to support, as institution, the agenda that the governments and the partners have agreed on. So let me, well, I won't spend much time on this. I just wanted to show here that from the 70s, when the global debate on environment, on sustainability, then in the 90s, has developed, there has been a growing understanding of the fact that the regional dimension is crucial, and that's why we are doing what we are doing here in the Mediterranean. It's crucial to translate this global agenda and objective at the national level. The region is where there is a sharing of problems, of issues, of cultures, of responses that is more effective than at the global level. So it is very important that the Agenda 2030 recognizes that work at the regional level among countries and actors that share, as I said, those problems and possibly the solutions, this is what guarantees better success at the national level. And this slide shows, a little bit, if you are interested, well, we can share the presentation, but it shows that what has happened at the global level within the United Nations has also then immediately translated at the regional level and specifically for us in the Mediterranean. Our own agenda as Barcelona Convention is therefore a way to implement the global agenda at the regional level. Now, my mother agency, so to speak, or father agency, parent agency within the United Nations is the Environment Programme, and I want to call your attention on a number of campaigns that the UN Environment has launched. These are meant not only as an awareness instrument. I really strongly encourage you to go and look at them and subscribe to them. These are commitments by individuals, by private sector, by organizations, by any entity, any community, and specifically the one on marine litter, clean seas, and the one on pollutions are very important for us in the Mediterranean. And it's great if you wish to see them and subscribe to them. This is something that not only makes you feel good, but actually pushes you to take action.
Oceans are the engines of the earth. However, threats from pollution, rising temperatures and overfishing are no longer out of sight, out of mind. Founded in 1974, the UN Regional Seas Programme supports 143 countries in 18 different regions to protect our ocean resources from pollution and improve ocean health. The Regional Seas Programs coordinate action plans and national implementation to make a difference for the people who depend on the sea. They raise the environmental awareness of the public, governments and decision makers, and initiate action on the ground. UN Environment's Regional Seas Programme is helping restore the balance, using worldwide collaboration and agreement, regional expertise, and national action. Together, we can make it work.
So this video is to show you the program of Regional Seas. The UN is not only for the Mediterranean, but there are several others around the world. Ours is the oldest one, the Barcelona Convention, but I'll go a little bit more in details afterwards. But just for the fun of it, I'd like to show you another video, which is a BBC documentary of when the Barcelona Convention was launched in 1979.
Geneva, 1979. The government experts on environment are meeting to review the progress of the action plan. In effect, Kesh-Kesh's planning is on trial, and so also is his optimism and determination. But this meeting will reveal the real commitment of the Mediterranean nations to saving their sea. Again, though, there is a sense about the meeting of a unique experiment in international relations. Albania is still the only absentee. The main issue is the extent to which the nations will take over from the UN the cost of funding the monitoring program. Although national laboratories do the work, the research itself is funded by UN grants. Now the UN wants the nations to cough up. France, Italy and Spain will have to pay the most. And for half a day, there's a great deal of pressure from these countries on Kesh-Kesh to justify certain of the research projects.
Señores delegados, buenos días.
Are the new laboratories in the less developed countries up to scratch?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Aren't some of the projects too complex and sophisticated at this stage?
Le représentant qui vient de faire le point sur...
Behind all the questioning lies the issue of the control of data.
Difficult in long run to estimate the present level of pollution of the Mediterranean.
The French, Italian and Spanish, for example, have their own open sea projects. Why then should they help pay for other Mediterranean countries to do the same work? Eventually, all is reasonably settled. Kesh-Kesh had expected a rough ride. And at the end of the day, there is a jewel in the crowning settlement that is of real value to the Mediterranean. For what comes through unmistakably is that the delegates are showing the real determination of their countries to go ahead with the treaty that they've been negotiating slowly and painstakingly over the past 2 years. They've asked the Action Plan team to place before them early in 1980 the most expensive treaty that they might ever have to sign. It will be a treaty to control land-based pollution at a cost to these nations of thousands of millions of pounds over 10 or 20 years. What is proposed for the treatment of sewage at Athens will have to happen by law at other large Mediterranean towns and cities. Marseille, Barcelona, Genoa, Tel Aviv, Beirut, Alexandria, all of these great cities will be faced with huge bills running into hundreds of millions of pounds. The clean-up at Foss will have to be repeated at all other industrial complexes. Of course, there will be difficulties. The problems faced by the Mediterranean Action Plan illustrate the global dialogue between rich and poor. The Mediterranean peoples may never fully understand one another, yet they now all recognize the one problem they have in common and share a unique opportunity to deal with it.
So this is certainly an interesting piece of history. Kesh is the guy with the beard. He was the one who, the visionary one who made it happen. Many things have changed. I mean, we don't